Jarrett Barnill. I'm from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, United States, in the Department of Psychiatry there. And I was very much involved in the development of the DMID, or Diagnostic Manual for Intellectual Disabilities. It was developed to try to cope with problems, trying to fit psychiatric diagnoses into the problems that folks with intellectual disabilities presented. And it was like a 7 or 8 year project. My responsibility was mainly the child section, and I did one on the intermittent explosive disorder, impulse control disorder. So stayed pretty busy with it. It was on the International Review Committee, so did a lot of stuff with it. So the posters about the modifications that we may have to make to the original Diagnostic Manual. It was basically Diagnostic Manual 2. And what we're trying to do is to try to look closely at all what's going on in neurosciences and genetics, and how do we begin to integrate that into psychiatric diagnoses, and then how do we integrate all the stuff with intellectual disabilities and all the neuroscience research coming out of intellectual disabilities with psychiatric disorders, and how to figure out how do we deal with this so clinicians can understand it and make it presentable. And I guess in a way it's like translational neuroscience. We're trying to get it to people, the ideas to people that can use it. I think some of it is trying to basically do basic education, and we do a lot of teleconferencing in conferences like this one to try to present what we're seeing and how that might be applied to the clinical problems people face. And I think some of it's just trying to think a new way, because I think we've always tried to describe things and put them into categories. And when things don't fit boxes very well, people don't fit boxes well, and how do we begin integrating all this stuff? And I think this is what's missing. I think in the long term, it may help us try to better understand what we're treating and then how to treat things more appropriately. Right now, I think we're using a lot of pharmacology that's sometimes poorly directed, that's not really reflecting what we know. And I think the same thing with behavioral interventions, family interventions, that there's a growing neuroscience in trying to link the changes in genes that psychotherapies can produce, changes in brain function that therapies can produce. And how do we make sense of that? And how do we get that to the point that the average clinician can look at this and say, this is what I need to do and why? I think what we're going to do is, can we move beyond it? It'll probably, as a foundation, will be DSM-5. And I think the DSM-5 is trying to integrate the ICD-11. And so probably my own fantasy would be, we take what's best of both of those, and then to modify it, because I don't think either one has really addressed the problems that folks with intellectual disability and autism face. It gets too complicated, and I think we run a danger if we specify and look at all the data we've got floating around and the new science, that it will get so specific that the clinician won't understand it. And I think the other thing is that we need to strike a balance between the science and the practical day-to-day living that people have to, and the experiences people have, and how do we understand those. And I think probably the future is going to be what we've called behavioral pharmacology. How do we begin to understand the pharmacology and the basic neuroscience of why people behave and why they self-injure, and to use that and apply it in a clinical sense. I think the DMID-2 we'll start working on it probably next year. And hopefully in about 4 years, 5 years, we'll have some of the fruits. And long term is how that trickles down to the practice community.